My name is Steve. I'm turning 46 this year. I work in sales at the American branch of a Spanish electronics manufacturer. I've always enjoyed my job, where I can use my Spanish skills that I've been good at since my school days. It's fun and very rewarding. When I was younger, I spent about 3 years assigned to our headquarters in Spain, and I've been back several times for training and business trips. Because of my busy life, I never had time for romance, and without many chances to meet someone, I remained single well past 45. But last year, fate stepped in. On my way back from visiting a client, as I was walking down the main street in front of the station, a tall man walking in front of me suddenly collapsed. He was clutching his abdomen in pain and groaning. I rushed to his side and crouched down, asking, "Are you okay?" But when I looked at his face, he seemed like a foreigner. Then he spoke to me in Spanish. "My chest hurts. Please call an ambulance." "Understood. I'll call one immediately." I responded in Spanish too and dialed 911 on my cell phone. While I was on the phone, a woman approached us. "What's happened here?" She looked to be a classy woman, about 60 years old. "This man says he's having chest pains," I explained. Then she spoke to the fallen foreigner in Spanish. "I'm a nurse. Can you tell me exactly where and how it hurts?" After that, she neatly placed her rolled-up jacket under the man's head and checked his pulse while asking about his condition. When the ambulance arrived, she explained the man's condition in detail to the paramedics and accompanied them in the ambulance. Watching her take charge, I thought she was pretty impressive. I saw her again when my dad, who lives alone, was hospitalized for colon polyp surgery. She was the nurse in charge of my dad's room. "Hey, you're the one from the other day. Oh my, thank you for that time." It seemed she remembered me too. "Thank you for that time too. You were a lifesaver. Was that man okay?" "Yes, because you called the ambulance right away," she said with a bright smile. "You're really good at Spanish, aren't you?" "Not really. It's all self-taught." "You studied Spanish by yourself?" "Yeah. I've always loved watching movies and foreign TV shows, so I got interested in Spanish. I learned by watching language programs on TV and buying books." "That's impressive. It seemed like you could speak Spanish too." "Well, I work for the American branch of a Spanish company, so I can speak a little." "Really? Have you ever been to Spain then?" "Yes, I have." She too had been to Spain on a trip. After that, we started talking every time we saw each other. Her name was Michelle, and she was about to turn 60. She was a cheerful person with a lovely smile, and talking to her was so enjoyable. I always wanted to chat more. Looking back, I realized I was totally smitten with her from the first glance. The age difference didn't matter to me. She was such an attractive woman. In our conversations, I learned she was divorced and currently single. Michelle has a daughter, but she's married and has left the house. So, I figured it wouldn't be a problem to ask her out. With that in mind, on the day my dad was discharged from the hospital, I asked her for her contact information. She readily agreed, and we exchanged numbers. Then, right after I got home, I asked her out to dinner. Since then, we've had dinner together several times and gone to the movies. The more I learned about her, the more I was drawn to her charm. She was kind and considerate to everyone, always bright and positive, and whenever I was tired from work or had something bothering me, talking to her would cheer me up. After about 6 months of dating, I proposed to her. "Michelle, will you marry me?" When I showed her the ring I had prepared and told her my feelings, she looked at me with her big, teary eyes and said, "Are you sure an older lady like me is okay? Age is just a number. I've got my heart set on you, Michelle. I can't imagine being with any other woman. I want to live the rest of my life with you," I said as I took her hand, and she began to cry. "Thank you. I want to spend my life with you, too, Steve," she answered. And with that, she accepted my proposal. She had decided against having a wedding ceremony, but when she turned 60 and retired from her nursing career, I seized the moment to take a 10-day vacation. We went on a honeymoon to Hawaii. This trip was not only a celebration of her 60th birthday but also her retirement, so we really went all out. We stayed at luxury hotels and ate at 5-star restaurants. Since I'd been single until I was 45 and didn't have any expensive hobbies, I had a good amount of savings. That's how we managed to go on such an extravagant trip. Michelle was overjoyed. Seeing her having the time of her life, like a young girl, I knew it was worth it. Returning from our trip, about 6 months into our married life, one morning, as usual, I headed to work and was called in by my boss. The president of a major client from our headquarters in Spain is coming to America with his wife for a trip. We'll be hosting a dinner reception, so please attend with your wife as well. My boss, Director Frank, said that and then specified the date and time. I'll let you know the venue once it's decided. Understood. As I was jotting down notes in my planner, Frank suddenly laughed. Ha! Well, I've heard you got yourself a wife. I was starting to think you'd end up a bachelor for life, but good for you for finding a woman with such unique tastes. Those scornful eyes were staring at me. Frank is only 2 years older than me, but his pride and joy has always been his much younger and beautiful wife. And he's always taken every chance to mock me. Stuff like, you must be lonely being single at your age, or there's no way a woman with any sense would want to marry a guy like you. He's looked down on me forever. But to still be hearing this kind of taunt even after I got married. I was fed up with it, but kept my silence. Worried that my wife would be subject to some unpleasant comments if I introduced her to such a boss, but since it was an order, I had no choice. We would have to attend. On the day of the dinner, I took Michelle to the designated restaurant. It was a high-end place for Italian cuisine. When I mentioned the name of the organizer to make our reservation and was led to the private room, there were Frank and his wife. Frank had every reason to brag. His wife indeed had the beauty of a model. Sorry to keep you waiting, Frank. As I greeted him, my boss Frank looked over his wife, who stood behind him, and said, Steve, why did you bring your mom along? I thought the deal was you'd bring your wife. Hearing that, I felt my blood boil. Frank had a spiteful smirk at the corner of his mouth. He probably knew exactly what he was doing, saying it on purpose. Harassment like this is almost a form of art. That's not my mother. Let me introduce to you. This is my wife, Michelle. Michelle, this is my boss, Director Frank. Oh, my apologies. You're his wife. I mistook you for his mother because of your distinguished appearance. Frank continued with such rude remarks. Glancing over, I noticed that Michelle was giving a strained smile while remaining silent. She was forcing a laugh, but I bet it was hurting her on the inside. I couldn't forgive Frank for hurting my wife. If he dared to say something that insulting again, I resolved to hit back hard next time. After a while, our client from the headquarters, Richard, showed up with a young employee as his guide. Nice to meet you. I'm Richard. Excuse me, but my wife Emma is currently in the restroom, so I'll introduce you to her shortly. Richard said that in Spanish. Frank and his wife, as well as Michelle and I, all introduced ourselves in Spanish. It seemed like Frank's wife wasn't very good at Spanish. Apart from stating her name, she barely spoke, and whenever Richard asked her something, Frank answered for her. In contrast, Michelle, whose Spanish was fluent, was happily chatting with Richard. Seeing this, Frank and his wife looked displeased. Anyway, Steve, how did you get up the nerve to marry a woman so much older than you? Frank started speaking in English abruptly. No matter how well she speaks Spanish, what's so good about a lady that looks her age? Everyone knows younger women are preferable, or maybe you've got a thing for older women. How old is she, anyway? Frank was speaking his mind without restraint. Indeed, Michelle did look her age at 60, and certainly didn't look young. But she had a beauty that comes with age, and her personality was wonderful. That's why I fell for her. To have her ridiculed with such harsh words, it felt like a complete denial of my love for my wife. "Boss, don't you think that's incredibly rude?" I said, my fist clenched and shaking. "What? You're going to talk back to me, your boss?" Frank said with a smirk. Richard, who didn't understand English, looked puzzled. "There are things you can and cannot say, even as a boss. He can say whatever he wants about me. I've been ready for it since I married you," Michelle said as she tugged at my sleeve. That's when it happened. The private room's door opened, and a foreign woman escorted by an employee came in. "Emma, over here, everyone, let me introduce you to my wife, Emma," Richard said, standing up. Emma was a tall woman, around 60 years old. When she took the seat next to Richard, she glared at Frank and began speaking in fluent English. I heard what was being said. "I am very displeased right now. Apologize to them immediately," she demanded sternly, leaving Frank open-mouthed and frozen. "I'm also 9 years older than Richard. What's so wrong with a wife being older than her husband? The notion that a woman needs to be younger to be appreciated is repulsive to me." Emma was fuming. Frank turned as white as a ghost. In a panic, he bowed his head to Emma. "I'm terribly sorry. Not to me. Apologize to him and her," Emma said, still angry. Then Frank turned to me and my wife and bowed deeply. "Steve, and to your wife, I'm terribly sorry for my rudeness. Please forgive me." Unaware of the situation, Emma told the whole conversation to Richard in Spanish. Richard's face turned red with anger. "What a rude man you are. I don't want to dine with someone who speaks so thoughtlessly. I'm leaving." It was Emma who calmed down the fuming Richard, who had shouted in Spanish. Well, he has apologized, so let's forgive him." "No way, I can't forgive him. Please leave now and never make such comments again." Richard's anger did not settle, and Frank, still pale, went home with his wife, looking downcast. Then, we introduced ourselves to Emma again. "Pleased to meet you. I'm Michelle, the wife of Steve Richardson." Hearing Michelle introduce herself, Emma's eyes widened. "Michelle, are you Michelle Richardson?" "Yes, that's me." "Oh, my God. I'm Emma Anderson, your email friend." Excited, Emma switched to speaking in Spanish. "What? You're Emma?" Michelle also looked incredibly surprised. The two of them joyfully clasped hands over this coincidence. Listening to their conversation, it turned out they had met on an internet forum and had been exchanging emails for over 20 years. Michelle had taught Emma English, and Emma had been teaching Michelle Spanish. So that's why Emma could speak English. Michelle was too shy, so they had never done a video call before. It seems they didn't know what each other looked like. What an amazing coincidence, though. To meet an email friend from overseas like this, and at such a place. The party really got going with Emma and Michelle's conversation at the center. The food brought out was delicious, and Richard and Emma enjoyed it too. Man, what a great day. I can forgive Frank's remark, but I'm truly happy that Emma and Michelle met by chance. Richard had also heard about Emma's longtime email friend before. "I've really been looking forward to trying authentic Italian cuisine, and I'm totally satisfied. I'll be sure to tell the folks back at the headquarters in Spain about this." After the meal, saying this, Richard left with Emma. It seems the dinner was a success. Later that day, back at home, Michelle said to me, "Steve, thank you for standing up to Frank earlier. I acted tough, but if you had gone along with Frank, it would have really shocked me. I'm relieved and glad that you stood up to him." Of course I'd stand up to anyone. I can tolerate anyone talking awful about my dear Michelle. But, Michelle, You said you were prepared for this when we got together. I had no idea you felt that way. Gotta admit, it was a bit of a shock. But we have a 14-year age gap. I don't exactly look young, and to outsiders, our age difference is pretty obvious, right? I was braced for some remarks. It was a relief that your parents didn't object and were supportive of our marriage. So that's what it was. You needed that kind of resolve to marry me. Still, thanks for marrying me, Michelle. Don't mention it. The happiness I feel being with you makes all that trivial. Michelle said this with a bright smile. Seeing her smile, I fell even deeper in love with her. A few days after Richard returned to Spain, my company called to say a major deal with his company had gone through. Richard had made a point of sending his regards to me. Apparently, Richard had also reported Frank's nasty comments to the headquarters, and as a result, Frank got demoted to a regular employee. And in his place, I was promoted to department head, effectively reversing our positions. Since that day, Frank stopped making condescending remarks towards me. He became utterly submissive, and seeing him bow was incredibly satisfying. Michelle and Emma continued to exchange emails and calls, staying good friends. It looks like Michelle is now planning a trip to Barcelona where Emma lives. Watching her talk excitedly about it, I want to protect that smile for as long as I can. I want to make her happy. That's what I thought. Sigh. I just can't stop sighing. I was on the verge of quitting my job when I was hit with an unbelievable situation. In my hands, I had a photograph from a matchmaking service. In it was a fair-skinned, beautiful woman. The other day, I was suddenly called into the CEO's office, trembling. I wondered what it was about as I went to listen. The CEO of a company we do business with wants to consult you. You know Mr. Johnson from the printing company. He has proposed a match for you with his daughter. Excuse me, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Of course, I didn't know Mr. Johnson all that well. I had been invited by our CEO to play golf with him a few times, and we had only chatted a little. Why me? What for? I was filled with nothing but these thoughts. Mr. Johnson's company is a fairly large corporation. A match with the daughter of such a distinguished company CEO seemed impossible. With all due respect, I've had to check with him several times. They definitely want to arrange a match between you and his daughter. No way. While in disbelief, I took the envelope that contained the daughter's photograph. That night, I called my mom back home to talk about it. Well, isn't that a fine offer? Why don't you meet the lady at least? Yeah, but I'm thinking of turning down the matchmaking. I see. I'm sorry. It's because I've become like this. It can't be helped. It's not your fault, Mom. It's just age. I plan to quit my job soon and return home. The reason is that I need to take care of my mother, who has a chronic illness. Fortunately, I have knowledge related to programming. I think I can make enough for living expenses even if I work from home. We'll make do. But Mom seemed unconvinced. But I can't bear to leave my frail mother alone at home. That's why I decided to move in with her. The next day, after returning from the office, I was walking to the convenience store near my house to buy dinner. Then, on a dimly lit side street I passed by, a woman was being hassled by a young man with a delinquent look. Hey, you bump into me and don't even apologize. What's that about? What's wrong with you? Why should I pay you and apologize when I didn't even bump into you? Hey, that girl is. I recognized the woman's face. On impulse, I called out to her. Kayla, long time no see. Hey, remember me, the attorney, Charles? We worked together on that case, remember? Oh, Charles, it's been a while. The woman responded to my words, perhaps catching on to my intent. Damn, some nosy guy showed up. Perhaps it was the mention of an attorney, but the man quickly left the scene. Are you okay? Yes. she answered in a faint voice, looking exhausted. I am. Yes, I recognized your face. You are Charles, my matchmaking partner, right? Yes, that's right. An awkward silence filled the air. She was unmistakably my matchmaking partner, the daughter of the client's CEO, Kayla. Why were you wandering around in such a place so late at night? After that, I had invited her to my place. If we had just stood there talking, that guy might have come back and done something. That's what I thought. I got lost, she stuttered. You didn't come here to subtly check up on me, did you? Her face turned startled for a moment before she continued. Yes, actually, that's true. At her words, I let out a big sigh. She must have been told by the CEO, her father, to suddenly have a matchmaking date with me. I understand being curious about a match arranged by your parents, but there's no need to come scouting out at this time of night. No, actually, I had a fight with my father about the matchmaking. Yes, a delicate air flowed between the two of us. If you don't like it, I think we could both go and turn it down. What do you think? No, I don't dislike the idea of matchmaking, but it seems like you're not keen on it. She looked down dejectedly. I let out a big sigh and told her that I had intended to decline the matchmaking and that I was planning to quit my job and return home soon. What? Quit your job? It's not that there's a problem with my current job. It's just that there's nothing I can do about it. I can't leave my sick mom alone any longer. I understand, she replied sadly to my words. I wonder what she's curious about, having only met me today. Even if it was the CEO's sole decision, it's not nice to just unilaterally call off a matchmaking, right? When I conveyed that, she said something unexpected. No, that's not it. I was actually looking forward to this matchmaking. But my father told me that you might not be interested, and I just couldn't sit still. So you came to check up on me. She nodded shyly, looking embarrassed. I was at a loss for words. I can start a relationship with her considering my future plans. And yet, this might hurt her feelings. I'm sorry, my father was being pushy. I'll tell him to call off the matchmaking from my side. No, but... She looked up with a sad face, and I was at a loss for words. Actually, this matchmaking, I pretty much asked my father for it. What? Don't you remember? We've met a long time ago. As she spoke, she took out her cell phone from her bag, but then she looked at the time and said, "Oh, it's so late. I really must go home now. Can I call a taxi? It's rude of me to be here at your place at this hour, and I'm sorry for any trouble I've caused." Sure. After that, a taxi arrived quickly, and she went home. Still, she said something strange. Where have we met before? To be honest, I only knew her from the matchmaking photo. Looking at her picture again, I was thinking with my mind racing. I just don't recognize that face. No matter how much I looked at her face, I couldn't remember. Then, my eyes landed on her ears in the photo. She was wearing cute earrings. Oh, I remembered something. But that was over 20 years ago. Could she be the girl from back then? As unlikely as it seemed, I decided to accept the matchmaking and verify it for myself. On the day of the date, when she arrived at the appointed upscale restaurant, I caught my breath at the sight of her. She was fitting for a CEO's daughter, with her fair skin and a gentle appearance. I can't believe you agreed to come. She blushed slightly and smiled happily. There's something I wanted to check with you. You're Kay, right? You finally remembered. Her face lit up with a smile. She was indeed Kay, my childhood friend. It's hard to believe. We haven't seen each other in over 20 years, right? Yes. Back in the day, she used to live near my family home. Her parents were often busy with work, and the neighborhood ladies and my mom looked after her. She ate at my house several times. Looking through photos my dad took, I saw you in one from when we went golfing. and I recognized you right away, but my dad didn't notice at all. When I told him that man was definitely Charles, he seemed to remember the past. I had been deceived by someone I was dating with the intention of marriage, and I had become distrustful of men for a while. But seeing that photo made me want to see you again, and I half-jokingly said that maybe I could marry you. I see. So your dad took it seriously then. She gave a wry smile. It seems her father, desperate for a good match for her and not finding any, seriously set up the matchmaking with me. But I really am thinking about marriage. Looking at her smiling face, I felt gloomy. I have plans to quit my job to take care of my mother at our family home. I don't even have another job lined up. I'll be without an income. If I were a father, I wouldn't allow my daughter to marry a man in such a situation. I will take good care of your mother, so can't we invite her here to stay with us? What? To have you take care of my mother right after getting married? I owe her since I was little. She took care of me. I would like to return the favor, she said, bowing her head. Please, let's continue our relationship. I've been troubled for so long, not meeting the right person. If I miss this connection with you, I feel like I'll never meet someone good for the rest of my life. Kayla, looking at her bowed head, I was speechless. The thought of her being chased by the duty of caring for my mother right after marriage pained my heart. But I can't let you go through such hardships. I'll be fine. Let's invite your mother here and live together, the three of us. Are you serious? I was overwhelmed by her statement. I'm not young anymore. I'm ready for that level of commitment. Her determination seemed firm. But what would Mr. Johnson think? A daughter going off to marriage, only to spend her days immersed in caregiving at her new home. Knowing this before the marriage, could a parent happily send off their daughter? Seeing my troubled face, she said, "Is caregiving really such an unpleasant thing?" Her question caught me off guard. My father will one day need care too, and someday I will as well. I think it's just part of life. Kayla's words struck me like a blow to the back of my head. That's true, but caring for someone else's parent is harder than you might imagine. I was cared for by your mother. I ate the food she cooked for me, even though I was someone else's child. It's the same thing. Her honest words swayed my heart. It's a thank you. Think of it as thanks for your mother. And do you remember this? Saying that, she touched the sparkling earrings by her ears. They were a pair with two overlapping heart motifs, which my father once said he had given to my mother as a present, and she had always worn them as her favorite. When I would gaze at them because they were so sparkly and pretty, your mother gave them to me. Wear them when you're older, she said. I only have a son, so I can pass them on, she told me while laughing. I remember that moment well. The reason I realized that she was Kayla, my childhood friend, was because I saw those earrings, which my mother had given her. I understand, let's consider it, taking my mother's opinion into account as well. Really, thank you so much. And that's how Kayla and I began dating. Both the CEO and my mother said the same thing, that they could finally relax knowing their child found a good person. It reminded me that all parents feel the same about their children. When I told my mother about living together with Kayla, she hesitated at first, saying she didn't want to interfere with the young couple and even suggested moving into a nursing home. But Kayla insisted that we should live together, and eventually, my mother agreed. And so, our life together as three began. Kayla has been taking great care of everything, from household chores to accompanying my mother to the hospital. I can only feel gratitude towards her. My mother seems so happy to have a companion. She smiles much more now than when she was living alone. Hey, what kind of design do you think would be good for a wedding ring? Well, maybe we should ask my mother too. Yes, let's talk about it during dinner. The conversation for tonight's dinner was set to be about the wedding rings. Next month, we're having our wedding. I can already imagine Kayla's father crying at the ceremony. I smiled to myself at that thought. My name is Mike. I'm a guy with a low education, having only graduated from middle school. The US used to be called a meritocratic society, but I'd think fewer people care about that nowadays. Nevertheless, there's someone who's been ridiculing me every day recently. That's my direct supervisor, Rachel Smith. Hey, dropout. Why are you dragging your feet with your work? Hurry it up. Yes, sorry. When she's in a bad mood, she gets rough with people like this. Moreover, she calls me dropout as a nickname. I feel humiliated, but what she's saying is true, so I'm in no position to argue back, which is frustrating. Then, one day, I went out for drinks with a colleague from work. Everyone, not just me, is fed up with our female boss's haughty attitude. Man, she's so annoying. I'd really like to get back at her. One of my colleagues even said something dangerous like that. Rachel is turning 50 this year, and I wonder if she's getting irritable because she's reaching menopause. If she'd just keep quiet, she'd actually be pretty. Well, she is an older lady though. My colleagues laughed loudly. My colleagues seemed to get more vulgar as they drink more, and the candid chalk really got the place going. Indeed, Rachel is a beautiful woman with a good figure and a pretty face. She must used to be quite popular when she was younger. In fact, she married in her 20s and has one child. Well, I admit she's beautiful, but she has a difficult personality, I guess. I can imagine living with someone like that. If it's like the company atmosphere at home, she'd definitely be divorced by now. But Mike, you always get chewed out by Rachel. She mocks you with dropout. It must really get to you, right? Well, yeah, but I'm used to it. I've been told enough times that dropout is a degree for those who lack motivation. To relieve my stress, I just kept drinking. All right, let's hit the next spot. My colleagues were red in the face, putting their arms around each other and making a racket. We had a surprisingly good time, so we decided to go to a nearby bar. But at this point, they were pretty drunk and I couldn't help but wryly smile at the thought of whether they'd be okay. Excuse me, check, please. One of my colleagues took care of the bill, so I gave my bill to him and went outside for some fresh air. The cool night air felt good against my flushed skin. Maybe I'll go somewhere cooler. That's what I was thinking when I walked a little away from the bar. And then, bam! I ran into Rachel, the one who ridicules me every day. I was taken aback. Rachel was dressed nothing like her usual suit attire but in flashy clothes instead. Her hair was wavy, possibly styled with a curling iron. She was wearing a miniskirt, and her makeup was on point. You wouldn't believe she's a 50-year-old married woman. She had transformed into a stunningly seductive lady. And she was walking with a considerably younger man. Is that her husband? No, but he seems too young. We made eye contact, and seeing Rachel's surprised look, I quickly averted my eyes, thinking I'm in trouble. This area is not only a busy district, but also close to a hotel district. Could it be? While thinking that, I glanced at Rachel again. She had indeed gone towards the hotel district. No way, I've just witnessed an affair. Then, finally, my colleagues came out of the bar. Hey, what's up? Did you run into someone you know? I was taken aback by my colleague's perceptiveness, despite being drunk. No, it's nothing. Sorry, I think I've had too much to drink. I'm gonna head home. With that, I excused them from the second round and went home with a heavy heart. The next day, while working, I couldn't help but sneak peeks at Rachel. Despite usually detesting even making eye contact with her, I inevitably found myself curious after seeing her last night. Rachel seemed as snappy as usual, but she appeared somewhat subdued today. Perhaps she was feeling particularly vulnerable about being seen by me last night, occasionally sending glances to me. Finally, Rachel gestured for me. "Mike, I need to talk to you. Do you have a moment to you do, right?" There was a definite urgency in her voice. I stuttered, "Yes," and followed her. The reason she called me out was, as expected, about last night. "Were you out drinking with colleagues yesterday?" she asked with a bit of hesitation. I nodded briefly, and after biting her lip slightly, "Did you tell anyone about what happened, that you saw me?" Rachel cautiously looked up and asked. "No, I haven't said anything. I went straight home after that, and I don't think anyone else saw you." Rachel seemed to exhale in relief. "I see. Thank you for keeping it to yourself. You caught me at a pretty embarrassing moment," I carefully said, making sure not to be overheard. "Well, it may be presumptuous of me as a single guy to say this, but I think cheating isn't right." Rachel, perhaps louder than intended in the hallway, exclaimed, "What?" I clarified, nervously, "I mean, when I saw you with that man last night, I thought that's what was happening." "What are you talking about? I was walking alone at that time." "Really?" I searched my hazy memory of the previous night. Wait. Now that I thought about it, the young man next to Rachel. It seemed like they were just walking in the same direction, not interacting closely. I finally realized my misunderstanding. Seriously, I was nearly the cause of spreading a nasty rumor. "I'm so sorry." "Well, it's okay, but me, having an affair, honestly, with how I'm feeling lately, it's scary to think I might actually do something reckless." Rachel gave a bitter smile, as if she was almost disgusted with herself for even having such a train of thought. "Did something happen, I mean, with your husband?" I asked, even though I thought it was somewhat impolite. "Oh, you want to know? This story might take a while," she replied with a teasing smile. Today, there was something different about Rachel. She didn't carry her usual boss-like aura. Instead, she felt more like an older sister, oddly approachable. Maybe it's because I kept her secret yesterday that I've gained her trust. Could that be it? I'm not sure why, but today she asked me to grab some drinks, just the two of us. It turned out to be an evening where she shared her current harsh reality. I learned she is a former race queen and has some experience as a model. It made sense given her looks. She married a successful businessman, a fitting match for an ex-model. They were happy and blessed with kids. But then, abruptly, their happiness was threatened. Her husband had a brain hemorrhage and collapsed. He survived without life-threatening injuries but was left paralyzed on his right side, leading to a wheelchair-bound life. From that point, the Smith family's life has changed drastically. Rachel found herself doing more at home, like helping her husband dress and use the toilet. Despite being tired from work, she couldn't rest at home and ended up carrying a lot of stress without realizing it. That's why my daughter, seeing this, tacked to her dad's folks. They suggested I take a break and go out with friends, she explained. "So, the reason you were heading to the hotel district that time was to go drinking with a friend?" "Yay, that's right. With a girlfriend, of course, but even though it was a break, I felt guilty for having fun while leaving my husband behind." Saying that, Rachel's face fell into a shadow. She shared her worries about her relationship with her husband growing sour. It seems his pride was hurt, having lived in front of the family as a main provider, and now being treated like an infant every day was making him short-tempered over little things. "He's changed so much," he slams the table saying, "I can do this much myself," and there was even a night I left him alone in the living room out of frustration. She said with a sad chuckle, then tears spilled from her eyes. "I'm trying so hard, changing his diapers, lifting his heavy body into the wheelchair, laying him in bed, every single day, so why do I have to be yelled at?" Rachel's voice was trembling. It felt like she couldn't hold back anymore. but I know he's the one who's truly suffering. He's only in his 50s, and now he's got a body that will never walk normally again, and he had to quit managing his company. It's understandable he's become self-destructive, and yet I should be supporting him more as his wife. I just can't stand the fact that I'm not kinder to him. I feel like such a failure as a wife." She covered her face with her hands and broke down crying. Rachel, who always took pride and never showed her weaknesses, was now crying in front of me, a subordinate who she used to mock for being a dropout. Looking back, she invited me out for drinks. She must have been so cornered mentally that she invited me out for drinks just to vent, regardless of who it was. Rachel apologized to me, saying, "I've been such a terrible boss," regretting taking out her personal issues on everyone lately. I felt her pain acutely, and my desire to forgive her grew stronger. Caregiving is really hard. I also helped take care of my grandmother at home until she passed away, I said. When I mentioned that, Rachel looked up in surprise. I decided to share my past with her. Originally, I was quite good at studies. Good enough that my teachers suggested I go to a more advanced school. But that dream didn't come true, because my grandma developed dementia. It was just my grandma, my mom, and me living together. After my parents got divorced and we moved in with my grandma. She was always so kind. However, she changed a lot after a fall broke her leg and a long hospital stay. The doctor said she seemed to have developed depression. It didn't take long for her to develop dementia. She would scream loudly and try to leave the house despite not being able to walk far due to the lingering effects of her fracture. This stress of possibly causing trouble for neighbors or putting her own life at risk was immense. Especially after hearing news about a family that was held liable for an accident involving their relative with dementia, my mom became very anxious and would sometimes scold my grandma harshly. Watching the two who used to get along so well argue was hellish for me. Naturally, my mom reached her limit first. She was clearly worn out and looked like she might collapse at any moment. Seeing her like that, I decided to drop out of high school and start working. My mom objected, but I insisted, and ultimately, I prevailed. After that, my mom and I took turns taking care of my grandma while contributing to the household expenses. Thankfully, my mom's health improved, and my grandma passed away peacefully a few years ago. Now, we live a peaceful life. I didn't realize you've been through so much. You gave up your education for your family. What an incredible person. And to think I belittled you for being a dropout. I'm really sorry. Hearing this, Rachel apologized to me again. It turns out Rachel is a high school graduate herself. She aimed for the entertainment industry when she was younger but gave up halfway, always feeling inferior about her education. So I was the one person she felt she could look down on to boost her own self-esteem, and she regretted that. I'm truly a lousy boss. Recently, my daughter has been saying she'll help with her husband's care. She's still a college student and should be studying, working part-time, and enjoying her youth, but I can't help feeling sorry. Rachel said with a downcast look. I suggested home care services and paid nursing homes to her. She seemed hesitant, understandably so. I understand the reluctance to place a long-time husband into a shared living facility with strangers. I get the hesitance. It's the internal conflict about whether it's okay to abandon family so easily. So, I gave some heartfelt advice. Actually, my grandma was in a nursing home just before she passed. At first, my mom and I were hesitating about entrusting her care to others, too. The guilt of neglecting a loved one's care. But it's true that it also eased our minds. I wondered if feeling relieved meant I didn't love her. But then I remember what a caregiver told me. Maintaining a certain distance is important. Being with even the most beloved person can be tough. So, using care services isn't bad at all. Please, don't bear this alone, Rachel, and ask for help. After my long spiel, Rachel's tears started to flow again. "Thanks for sharing. I'm glad I could talk to you, Mike," she said, thanking me over and over. Afterward, my boss returned to her usual self, and she started to smile more gently. It seems that using home visit services significantly reduced her stress, and her relationship with her husband improved. Her husband, being a successful businessman, had savings, so financially, it was easy to afford care services. Some people can't use care services even if they want to because they don't have the money. Rachel is very lucky in that sense. Thanks to you, Mike, my daughter is also enjoying her college life. You really saved our family. You are truly the Smith family's savior. That's an exaggeration, but I'm glad I could help a bit. As I said that, Rachel looked intently at my face. By the way, you're single, right, Mike? Seeing anyone? What? Yes, I'm single now though. Then Rachel clapped her hands. That's perfect. When I told my daughter about how caring you were with the elderly care stuff, she got interested in you. If you don't have a girlfriend, maybe I should introduce you to her, she said, showing me a photo of her college-age daughter, making me all awkward. Oh boy. The daughter of my boss. That's intimidating. But she's quite pretty. I crossed my arms, wondering what to do, conflicted. One day, I saw my fiancée, who was soon to be married, walking arm in arm with some guy I didn't recognize. After a night shift, I was driving to pick her up. This city, on the cusp of Christmas, was brightly decorated and the faces of the people bustling about were cheerful. From inside the car, even my heart, against my usual demeanor, felt festive. I'm Jim. Working in real estate, I always pick her up from her job on my day off, Wednesday. Her name is Anna. We met through a colleague, Brandon, and have been dating for 3.5 years. Anna is a nurse. Never having been hospitalized myself, my only knowledge of what a night shift nurse does comes from the stories Anna tells me. But seeing the sheer exhaustion on her face as she gets into the car, I understand it's no easy job. Today, she looks especially spent. Rough day, but you look beat, I say. Can you tell by my face? Oh, I hate that. Saying this, Anna bashfully covered her face with her hands. Her gesture was so endearing, I just wanted to hug her right then and there. But I'm driving. Must resist. You seem really sleepy. Maybe we should postpone the venue viewing for another time. We had plans to go check out a wedding venue. Jess, we are getting married. We've introduced each other to our families and are in the midst of deciding on the venue and the date. Let's go since we're all here. I'm fine, really. Plus, I've been looking forward to today for so long. As she said this, Anna's eyes were sparkling. Next, we're headed to a small chapel on the outskirts of town. It was the first place Anna had suggested. Choosing a humble venue over a fancy hotel really shows her modest and gracious character. It was a much better place than I imagined. On the way back from the chapel, looking at the brochure, Anna said excitedly, "Should we just decide on that place? I think I want to check out a few more places. Anyway, I want to get married as soon as possible," I said, and Anna nodded happily. Having the person I love by my side, smiling at me. I can't imagine anything happier than this. I will definitely make her happy. That's a promise I made to myself. But suddenly, those happy days came to an abrupt end. It happened one day. Working overtime, I noticed my coworker, Brandon, lingering around me, looking like he wanted to say something. Come to think of it, Brandon has been acting strange since this morning. I figured he might have a stomach ache or something, so I just kept working. Couldn't you just ask what's wrong? Impatient, Brandon finally approached me. What's up? You need something? No, it's hard to say here. Reluctantly, I let Brandon drag me to our usual tavern. After taking a sip of the draft beer that had been served, I turned to Brandon. "So, what is it you wanted to tell me?" "Well, you see," Brandon mumbled, hesitating. I let out a big sigh. "If you just wanted to drink, you should have said so from the start." "It's not that. Just calm down and listen, all right?" Typically when Brandon starts like this, it's usually some trivial story. About how the lady at the office greeted us with a smile, or about the boss walking with a young woman. "Did you catch the branch manager in an affair?" I said, browsing the menu. "That's it." Brandon nearly stood up as he pointed at me. I couldn't care less about the branch manager's flings, to be honest. "It's not the branch manager I saw, it's..." As I shifted my gaze from the menu to Brandon's face, he was looking at me with a strangely serious expression. A vague feeling started to creep over me. "No way," I thought. "Jim, I heard you're about to get married, and I didn't want to stir the pot, but you're my colleague and a good friend. I was the one who introduced you to Anna, my friend from college days, so I have to tell you." My heart started racing. With my palms starting to sweat, I waited for Brandon to continue. "I saw it, man, Anna walking arm in arm with another guy." I felt the blood drain from my face. This is a sick joke if it's meant to be one. It's no joke. At first, I thought I was seeing things, but look at this. Brandon showed me a picture on his phone. It was taken from behind, but it was definitely Anna. She was wearing the turquoise blue scarf I gave her last Christmas, walking arm in arm with a man, as if they were supporting each other. What does this mean? I tried to think rationally about the situation, but my mind wouldn't work because of the shock. It just can't be. Anna wouldn't do something like this. Betray me like this. After parting ways with Brandon, I immediately called Anna and told her, "I'm coming over now." Then, I hopped into a cab and headed to Anna's place. When I rang the doorbell, Anna quickly unlocked the door and greeted me. "What's up? You surprised me, coming over all of a sudden." She must have been getting ready for bed. Her hair was still damp and loosely tied up, with a cardigan thrown over her nightwear. As I stepped into the room, I began without turning to face her. "Brandon says he saw you walking arm in arm with some guy I don't know." The air suddenly tensed up. Despite the heating being on, it felt like the temperature in the room was dropping fast. Anna remained silent. "Brandon's just mixed up, right?" My voice trembled pathetically. Anna was still quiet. The only sound in the room was the irritating tick of the alarm clock by the bed. And then, "It's not a mix-up," she said in a faint, thin voice. An uncomfortable silence spread once again. Unable to bear the quiet, I laughed it off. "You guys are pulling my leg, aren't you? Cut it out. I'm really bad with this kind of prank." As I sat down on the couch, Anna sat a little distance away. "Listen, I've decided to break up with you and start seeing him. I was going to tell you soon, but it slipped out now." Anna's face was serious. To me, it seemed like something from another world, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Laughing hysterically as if I'd lost my mind, Anna continued. "I'm going to date him." "Him? Who is he?" "He works at a nightclub." "A nightclub?" The guy in the photo looked pale, with delicate features, almost unhealthy. Now that you mentioned it, he did look the part. "What about getting married?" "I never planned on that from the start. Even after introducing you to my parents, that was all you're doing. You've betrayed me." "I was never serious. It was just a game. An adult should understand that, right?" For the first time in my life, I felt the urge to hit someone. This strange laughter had vanished, and my heart was rapidly filling with despair and intense anger. Then, I hurled every curse and insult I could think of at Anna. I was surprised at myself for being able to come up with such filthy words. Get out. I don't even want to see your face anymore. With those words, a single tear trailed down on his cheek. It felt so phony. Betraying me and running off with someone else. I grabbed the photo frame that caught my eye. Displayed was a selfie of us at the Santa Monica beach. That's when I popped the question. She was so happy then. I violently threw the photo frame into the trash and left in his room. That was the end of our story. From then on, I threw myself into work, trying not to think of Anna. Once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. I was driven by a desire to erase it all. Drowning in work as if to inflict pain on myself, with a deeply wounded heart. Nightly, I drowned my sorrows in booze with Brandon and the juniors, forcing myself to sleep. I'd become dependent on alcohol to sleep. But it was my junior, Lucy, who supported me. She worried about how gaunt I was getting and gave me a thermos of warm soup. Her kindness thawed the ice in my veins, warming me through. Eventually, Lucy and I started dating. Brandon, who had a thing for her, grumbled a bit, but he genuinely congratulated me, wishing me happiness as I sought it anew. He was worried about me too, considering I'd been on the brink of self-destruction. 2 years after splitting with Anna, Lucy and I got hitched. Betrayal from someone I loved with all my heart. It shattered my soul to pieces, to the point I thought I couldn't stand up again, but thanks to Lucy, I've been able to open up my heart to love once more. I overcame it because she was there. Now, I want to be there for her. I was determined to make Lucy happy for the rest of our lives. A year later, the season of Christmas returns to our town again. The familiar scenery, now lit up with Christmas lights, made my heart skip a beat. No matter the age, Christmas always brings that excitement. I looked around, scanning the shop windows for the perfect find. Today, I was on the hunt for Lucy's Christmas gift. Gloves were last year's gift, and jewelry just lacks originality. Maybe splurging on an electric bike would do the trick. As I pondered, a familiar profile caught my eye. It was Anna. She was wearing the turquoise blue scarf I gave her, pushing a wheelchair. The man in the wheelchair must be the guy from that photo. He works at a nightclub, doesn't he? I thought he'd be out of the picture soon enough, but they're still together, huh? A dark flame began to burn in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't contain my hatred and stepped forward to confront them. "Hey there," startled by my sudden appearance, and his eyes widened. "Jim, still using that scarf, I see." "Yeah, well," my gaze fell on the man in the wheelchair. The guy, with his black beanie, didn't so much as glance our way, just kept looking straight ahead. I felt a surge of arrogance at his demeanor and couldn't help but throw a sarcastic jab. "Had an accident. That's what you get for stealing someone's girlfriend. Serves you right." I admit, it was a mean thing to say. But the guy said nothing back. As I was about to yell at him, and it cut in. "We're in a hurry," and with that, she pushed the wheelchair past me. I watched them go, feeling oddly satisfied. I'd always wanted to give that guy a piece of my mind. After all that, he didn't have a comeback. It makes sense, though. He's the one in the wrong, so he couldn't say anything. At that moment, I felt no remorse, almost smug about their misfortune. Days later, I was on a business trip. This is where Anna's parents live. I've been here before to meet them, back when things were good. If I remember right, there's a decent diner behind the station. After wrapping up a meeting with a client, I decided to grab a bite to eat. As I walked down the main street, I saw familiar faces coming my way. They were supposed to be my in-laws and his parents. Is this kind of coincidence even possible? No, they live around here, so it's not odd to see them shopping in town. Yet, there are two people who have nothing to do with me anymore. Should I just pretend I don't know them and pass by? As I was mulling it over, Anna's mom looked my way and our eyes met. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly looked away. Jim, despite my silent plea not to be noticed, Anna's mom called out my name. Her voice, which I hadn't heard in years, sounded weary. It's been a while. You look well, that's good. Well, how could I be? How could I possibly be okay? Thanks to Lucy, I've picked myself up, but do you have any idea how much your daughter made me suffer? Annoyed by her thoughtless words, I forced a smile and said, So, Anna dumped me like trash and is living happily ever after with someone else who works at a night bar. Well, good for her. What? The two of them looked puzzled. Don't tell me they didn't know about the guy's job. Yeah, I was shocked to learn that Anna had become such a player. Speaking of which, did that host guy get into an accident? Must be karma, what goes around comes around. I expected them to snap at me, but instead, they just looked at each other, confused. After a brief consultation, Anna's mom turned to me and said, Did Anna actually tell you that? Yeah, she did. Didn't you know? We've known him since she was little. He's not. What? Anna's mom chose her words carefully, trying not to hurt me. Anna's mom told me this. The man in the wheelchair wasn't her enemy guy or anything. He was Anna's childhood friend. And also the one who saved her life. Anna was born with a heart condition and occasionally had attacks when she was a child. During her middle school years, she had a severe attack while walking home alone and collapsed on the side of the road. Thankfully, he came by and called an ambulance, which likely saved her from a worse fate. It was a road not many people traveled, so if he hadn't passed by, help might not have come in time. From then on, until they graduated middle school, he always made sure to walk her to and from school, always ready to assist if something happened. Due to all this, Anna and her parents couldn't thank him enough, feeling an immense sense of gratitude. His kindness also inspired Anna to want to save others, which led her to pursue nursing. But even hearing this, I couldn't accept it. Even if he was her lifesaver, it doesn't give him a reason to treat me so poorly and cause me such pain. I didn't sugarcoat it. I threw these words right at Anna's mom. After a brief hesitation and with a trembling voice, she replied, He has, Els. Afterward, I managed to get back to work, but her words stuck with me. Els, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I had heard the name before. Once home, I opened my laptop and searched for information about the disease. It's a progressive disease where muscles stop working as you'd expect, making it difficult to speak clearly and swallow food. Eventually, the muscles needed for breathing weaken, and a ventilator becomes necessary to extend life. And once it starts, the symptoms never get better. I heard the front door open. Looks like Lucy got back from work. In a panic, I shut the laptop. I'm home. Hey, what's wrong? You look pale. It's nothing. I might have done something terrible. Even if I didn't know, to be so rude to someone suffering from such a terrible disease. I felt like I was being torn apart by intense regret. He didn't ignore me. He just couldn't turn to face me. I owe Anna, and her childhood friend, an apology. I'm gonna take a walk for a bit. With Lucy giving me a puzzled look, I grabbed my phone and left the house. My breath was white in the cold air. Before I knew it, it was already past the 20th of December. My hands were numb from the cold as I fumbled with my phone, trying to find Anna's number. This was the first time I was calling Anna since we broke up. Would she pick up? After a few short rings, I heard Anna's familiar voice. Hello, it's me, Jim. That's all I could manage before we both fell silent. I still hadn't figured out how to apologize. The north wind was piercing my cheeks. A feeling of inadequacy overwhelmed me, squeezing my frozen chest tight. Anna was the first to break the silence. You heard from my mom about him. Yay, about that. I'm really sorry for what happened before. I don't expect forgiveness, but no, it's me who should say. Actually, he's been wanting to see you. Can you meet him tomorrow? To see me. I wasn't feeling up for it, to be honest. But I felt I had to. I was the one who said he deserved divine punishment. I need to apologize face to face. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop in front of the station the next afternoon and hung up. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop an hour earlier than the scheduled time. I couldn't settle down at home. I couldn't gauge Anna's feelings through the phone call the day before. Was she angry? Or was she sad? After about half an hour, the cafe's door opened, and I saw Anna coming. She was pushing the wheelchair just like she had been the other day. When she spotted me, she deftly changed the wheelchair's direction and headed straight towards me. I gave a slight nod and watched her approach. "You're pretty early, aren't you?" Anna said with a weary smile. That unchanged smile of hers made my old wounds ache. "It's been a while, so he is. He's Kevin, just like my mom told you. He is my childhood friend. He can't move or talk normally anymore." Anna spoke while wiping Kevin's hands with a wet wipe. I didn't know what to say and just stood there awkwardly watching. After carefully wiping his hands, Anna bowed deeply to me. "I'm really sorry about that time." I was terribly shaken, thinking that I should be the one apologizing, and I couldn't even respond. Ashamed, I cast my eyes downward. No matter how I try to explain it now, it won't change the fact that I betrayed you and hurt you, but I need you to hear this. Anna continued. At that time, Kevin's illness had already progressed to the point where walking alone was difficult. Even if we thought to go for a walk for a change of scenery, during the bright hours when people were around, someone would laugh at his awkward gait or say something heartless. So it became our routine to walk together on less crowded streets late at night. Hearing this, I wished I could just disappear from the spot. The one who had said those heartless words, wasn't that me? I would take Kevin's arm and walk slowly, with me beside him. What Brandon saw was just that. Brandon did indeed see Anna. But she wasn't leaning on him out of dependence. It was to support Kevin. Then why? You could have just explained all this to me. Anna looked down sadly when she heard this. The words that finally came out of my mouth were accusing Anna. No, that's not what I want to blame her for. I was disappointed in myself for not being able to express my feelings properly. Then, still looking down, Anna whispered, "Kevin's parents are gone, so I'm the one to support him." It struck me. Of course, that explains everything. She distanced herself from me to take care of Kevin. Why make up a lie about his job? That should have been obvious. Did you lie? For my sake. It's not your fault. I didn't want to burden you with this repayment. If you knew, you'd definitely say you wanted to shoulder it too. You're a very kind-hearted person. What is she saying? That's for my sake, isn't it? Just as Anna said, if I had known back then, I would have definitely decided to shoulder it with her. Knowing that, Anna did something that would make her be disliked. Anna, she gave up her own happiness for her benefactor. As I stood there dumbfounded by the harsh truth thrust upon me, Kevin let out a short cry. Anna listened carefully and began to speak a few words. I remembered seeing it back in high school during a health class. It was a way to communicate with people who couldn't speak, using mouth shapes. Anna used this method to understand what Kevin was trying to say. Kevin said, "I didn't know you were engaged. Dump me and let's start over. Silly, I've told him that I'll never leave him for the rest of my life. Kevin, unable to move his facial muscles, appeared expressionless, but his eyes seemed to carry a hint of sadness. Unaware of Anna's turmoil, that day I cursed her out in a fit of anger. "Is there anything I can do to help?" To my question, Anna shook her head gently with a small smile. "Live your life, be happy." Under the table, I clenched my fist tightly. I felt so powerless that I wanted to punch myself in the face. I certainly loved Anna back then. If Anna is struggling, I want to support her somehow. If she has chosen her path, I want to walk beside her. But I swallowed my words and looked straight into Anna's eyes to say, "I respect your strength. I'll always be rooting for you, so please, find happiness, Anna." Anna nodded slowly, with the same gentle smile she had 3 years ago. She waved her hand slightly in front of her face before turning her back. As I watched her in a daze, Anna turned around as if remembering something and said to me, "Merry Christmas, though it's a bit early. We probably won't see each other again. But I hope you will be happy. May your chosen path be filled with light." I closed my eyes and prayed earnestly. When I got home, Lucy was decorating the Christmas tree. She was stretching to put a star-shaped ornament on top of the tree, taller than herself. "Welcome back. Hey, can you put this on for me? I can't reach." I took the star from Lucy. I wish such brightness would shower upon Anna and Kevin. May darkness stay away, and only overflowing happiness embrace them. With that thought, I became so wistful that tears began to fall uncontrollably. Surprised by my sudden tears, Lucy looked into my face with concern. I hugged Lucy desperately and told her I loved her over and over. "I will live my life and be happy with Lucy. We will cherish each other and live happily ever after." I made that promise in my heart.